How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Top Buy, Top Sell here in the A1 Edge Finder, where we're going over our number one buy and our number one sell setup of the day. Before we get into that, we're going to take a look at two things really quickly. We're going to look at first COT data and then retail positioning. We actually did one of these on Monday where we looked over the COT data, but it has since been updated. It was updated on Tuesday when the COT data document was released. It wasn't released on time last week because of the 4th of July, but we do have brand new COT data, so let's go over that together. Not a ton of change in terms of overall positioning. We still see the Swiss franc, the Canadian dollar, and the Japanese yen as our three most shorted positions from institutional traders, with the Swiss franc being the most short out of all of them. 88.93% of open positions right now from institutional traders are short on the Swiss franc, whereas on the other side we still see the same three again. It's silver, oil, and gold, all very long when it comes to COT data, gold being the most long right now at 87.9% of open gold positions to the long side. The US dollar still sitting in the bullish range, 66.93% long on the US dollar. We see the pound just slightly ahead of it at 70.48, and the euro still sitting around 50-50, 51.41% short, 48.59% long, so very undecided on the euro right now. Let's take a look at latest weekly COT filings. This is the chart that compares the last COT data to the most recent COT data, and we can take a look at how many long and short contracts were either added, taken away, and the overall net change percentage. So this week, the Dow Jones, or the US 30, was the most bullish change of the week, with 2,135 total long contracts added and 5,107 short contracts closed. We see that the Dow has just barely crossed over the 60% threshold here, 61.26% long from institutional traders. And the Nikkei, the Japanese stock market, was the most negative change, with 134 long contracts closed and 4,456 short contracts opened. Right now, still sitting pretty close to 50-50, slightly leaning towards the long side, but not cross the 60% threshold that we like to use to score things when it comes to COT data. So this is still getting kind of a neutral bias right now. So that's an example of how you read this chart here. I'll let you pause the video if you want to look further into that, but I'm going to move on to retail positioning, and we're going to take a look at what day traders are long and short on at the moment. We'll start first with major currency pairs, and right now day traders are long things like USD CHF and USD CAD, both over 60% here, and that is a bearish indicator for us. Whereas the Australian dollar, the euro dollar, and the pound dollar are all three on the short side, favored on the short side, 70, 76, and 77%. Those are bullish indicators for us. Now let's take a look at minor currency pairs, and we can see Euro Pound, Euro Aussie, and USD ZAR favored on the long side from day traders. Again, bearish indicators for us, and all of these pairs here being favored on the short side, with Aussie CAD at 97% short. There's actually a lot of really heavily shorted pairs here. Pound CAD and Pound New Zealand at 96%, Euro CAD at 92%. So day traders are really short those pairs, but all of these blue ones here that you see on this left side, these are all bullish indicators for us. Let's finish up with metals, indices, crypto, and commodities. I'll remove minor currency pairs, and there we go. So when it comes to all of these, we see a lot of long signals here. That is a bearish indicator on all of these. And the NASDAQ, UK 100, and S&P 500 are overall favored on the short side. NASDAQ and UK 100 just barely right at 60%, but that is still a bullish indicator for us. Now let's go back on into top setups. I'm going to remove any neutral biases that we have so that we're left with just bullish and bearish biases. And we have a really big list right now with a lot of bullish indicators, a lot of very bullish indicators as well, but one stands above them all. It's Aussie CAD with a score of +12, that very bullish bias there, and we have two that are tied for very bearish, CAD Yen and USD ZAR, both with scores of -11. And because we don't have a US dollar pair in the bullish side, we're going to look at Aussie CAD. We'll look at USD ZAR instead of CAD JPY. So let's go ahead and dive right on into, we'll start with Aussie CAD first. We'll start with our bullish indicator. So Aussie CAD right up top with that very bullish bias score of +12. Market analysis, free trading courses, Edge Finder data, and special offers. What do these things all have in common? They're all available for you right now inside of our free Discord. You can click the link down in the description below to join the free Discord today and get access to all of this and more. Stay up to date with all the latest trading information and A1 content. And if you want to upgrade to our Gold VIP Discord that features every single trade that Trader Nick and our other professional analysts take, you can find the links for that in the description as well. So don't wait, go check out the free Discord today. So like I've said, score of +12, very bullish bias for Aussie CAD. COT Data is a score of +2, and retail sentiment a score of +1. Right now, institutional traders are pretty much 50-50 on the Australian dollar, 54.61% short, 45.39% long. You know, again, we talk about crossing that 60% threshold before we score something one way or another. So Aussie CAD, kind of a neutral bias, but the Canadian dollar is definitely favored on the short side, one of our most shorted assets in terms of COT data at 86.68%. The weekly trend, the weekly report last week to this week was negative for the Canadian dollar and positive for the Australian dollar. Retail sentiment, this is one of those that they were super heavily favored short on. Day traders were 97% short on Aussie CAD right now. Seasonality is a score of +1, and we can see that historically speaking, over the last 10 years in the month of July, again, historically, Aussie CAD trades higher. Our trend reading right now is a score of +2, and we can take a look at the price forecast tab here in the Edge Finder to get a look at the actual daily price chart of Aussie CAD. So let's pull that up. In fact, I'll just search it, AUD, CAD. There we go. And yeah, so pretty much ever since late June, this thing has just continued to move higher and higher almost every day, and price forecast predicts that that's going to continue to be the case. So very clearly in a pretty solid uptrend right now. We'll head on back and finish up with our fundamental data. Right now, GDP, manufacturing PMI, inflation, and interest rates are all 0 scores. Services PMI and employment change +2 scores, and retail sales and unemployment rate a +1 score. Taking a look at our economic growth data tab here, we see GDP for currency A. Currency A, of course, is going to be the first currency pair listed, so that would be the Australian dollar. GDP B would be the second currency pair listed, so that would be the Canadian dollar. And we just have it kind of simply put here for a miss, a beat, or met expectation. So whatever the forecasted, in this case right now we're looking at GDP, whatever the forecasted GDP was for the Australian dollar, it missed that expectation. It also missed that expectation for the Canadian dollar, and that's why that's kind of a wash right here. That's why we see a 0 or neutral score here. If you want to look further into GDP data, PMI data, retail sales data, we have all of those more detailed fundamental breakdown pages over here on the left side, but in the actual breakdown page, we just kind of keep it nice and simple. Did it meet, miss, beat, or met expectations? But again, if you want to go further into it, in fact, I'll pull it up really quickly just to show you. If we go into GDP growth here, we can take a look at GDP growth for all of the currencies that we track here in the Edge Finder. So we have the US dollar pulled up. I'll pull up the Australian dollar here. And we can see that the forecasted number was for 0.2% GDP growth. The actual reported number was 0.1%. So that was a miss on the GDP front. So that's how you would read this chart here. But we'll go back into our data scanner and finish up with our fundamental data. So manufacturing PMI was a miss for both. Services PMI was a beat for the Australian dollar, but a miss for the Canadian dollar. and retail sales were a beat for Australia and just met expectations in Canada. Inflation right now was forecasted at 3.4%. In Australia, it came out at 3.6. In Canada, it was forecasted at 2.7. It came out at 2.9. We can also see the jobs data here. The employment change forecasted at 0.26. It came out at 0.28 for Australia, and forecasted at 0.13 for Canada. It came out at negative 0.01. The unemployment rate forecasted at 4.1% in Australia came out at 4, and in Canada forecasted at 6.2%. That came out at 6.4%. So there we go. There's all the numbers and data backing up that plus 12 score very bullish bias on the Australian dollar, Canadian dollar cross. Now we're going to take a look at USD ZAR on the short side of things, bearish side of things. Minus 11 score, very bearish bias. COT data a score of -2, and retail sentiment a score of -1. So we see here for the US dollar that they are favored on the long side at 66.93%, but their weekly change was actually negative, which means that from the last report to our most recent report, there were more short contracts opened than there were long contracts, or more long contracts taken away than there were short contracts. Either way, it was a negative week in terms of COT data when it comes to the dollar. The ZAR, on the other hand, pretty much 50-50 when it comes to long and short percentages. This is not getting scored one way or another because it's not crossed 60%, but the weekly change was positive for the South African rand. Day traders, retail traders right now favored long at 62%, and that, again, that is a bearish indicator for us. Seasonality, a score of -1. We can see, historically speaking, over the last 10 years averaged together, in the month of July, typically USD ZAR does trade lower. Our trend reading right now is a score of -2, and we'll hop back on into price forecast to take a look at the daily chart for this. So it's actually right here at the top, USD ZAR. And while this thing was in a little bit of an uptrend towards the end of June, once it hit July, this thing started a very sharp downtrend, which has continued, and price forecast projects that it will continue to do that. We'll finish up with our fundamental data. GDP growth, our one lone blue box here with a score of +2. Manufacturing PMI score of -2. Same with retail sales. Services PMI is a score of -1. So is inflation and interest rates. Employment change and unemployment rate, both 0 or neutral scores. So again, currency A here is going to be the US dollar because it is listed first. Currency B will be the South African rand, ZAR, because it is listed second. So GDP in the US was a beat, and it was a miss in South Africa. Manufacturing PMI, we see the opposite. We see a miss for the dollar and a beat for South Africa. Services PMI, a miss for both, and retail sales, a miss for the dollar, but a beat for South Africa. CPI, inflation in the US came down lower than expected, forecasted at 3.1%, but came out at 3%. In South Africa, however, it came out as expected at 5.2%. And then our jobs data here, we can take a look at the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate forecasted at 4% actually came out at 4.1%, and the forecasted unemployment rate in South Africa at 32.1% came out at 32.9%. So there we go. There is all the data and numbers backing up that -11 very bearish bias on USD ZAR. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you want the Edge Finder for yourself, you can find it in the links down in the description below or on our website, A1trading.com. And if you want it at a discounted price, you can use promo code A1YT at checkout for a discount on the Edge Finder. Did you know we do a live trading show Monday through Friday with guests from all over the world? To get notified when we go live, click the bell button next to the subscribe button or check in at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We have helpful, free content in the description below and on our website, A1trading.com. Thanks for watching today's video, and we'll see you tomorrow.